What's up, Soul Nation? Brian here, and today I really want to kind of dive into an explanation about how I view violence in video games. Over the weekend, I tweeted out a picture of Maddie and Annie kind of trying to play Destiny 2. It was downstairs, I was playing a little Destiny, and Maddie asked to play, and she's about 5 years old, and I said sure, and the controller's too big for her, and that also got into a discussion about what would be a really good controller for a 5-year-old to kind of be able to play more complex games rather than just like Mario or a game on the Switch, which is really perfect for the size of her hands right now. And part of the conversation kind of rolled into what, as a parent, do I look at and how do I evaluate violence in video games? And honestly, I thought it'd be easier for me to explain it than just to tweet about it. Maybe, maybe this would be a good format for it. And so let me know what you guys think, and if you're interested in these kind of discussions in the comments below. But I have what I would consider a very weird scale when it comes to video game violence and what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. And I've always known that about myself. And so I'm going to do my best to try and explain it. But if you have a question about what I mean on any particular thing, just let me know and I'll try to answer it in the comments. But so video game violence doesn't bother me and has never bothered me whatsoever. I don't have personally like, oh, a game's violent. Okay, not a big deal. But I'm also somebody who's not affected by that. And I'm not, just like my grandfather was an alcoholic, it's something I always kind of try to monitor in myself when it comes to if I'm going to have a beer or not. So I'm not going to sit here and say that people aren't affected by video game violence. I'm not an expert in that, and I'm not making any claims of that regardless. I just know that personally for myself, I'm not impacted by it. So it's never really like bothered me one way or another. It's never made me feel overly aggressive towards others. Anyway, so it's never been this kind of measure of what I should and shouldn't play. However, there are some exceptions to this rule for me and my family. So a game that has violence like Destiny, in most cases, especially within the content, I'm shooting kind of aliens and monsters and big ogres and things like that. There's a kind of a fantasy to that. There's kind of an interesting appeal, just like if I was playing Final Fantasy or some other game where the action and the violence isn't necessarily being perpetrated on to humans, or at least not all the time. There are times like in Final Fantasy and in Destiny where you're fighting other kind of humanoid style kind of enemies. And then but then you look at why I don't go and play The Division and The Division 2 around my kids. And it's namely because the violence is so human on human violence. And like I said, I'm not impacted by it, but that doesn't mean that I've always, that not everybody is that same way. And especially for young kids and impressionable kids, like I don't necessarily need my kids to be exposed to that right away. So there's always kind of a level in which that what is actually happening on screen. And then it kind of applies to the gore level. Like you look at Call of Duty 4, we were playing that for a while, but that was always like late at night when the kids would go to bed. And we actually really didn't stream it that much because of that violence, again, that human on human. But then Halo seems to be okay, even though they're these giant mech suits, these Spartan armor and things like that. That has never specifically bothered me because the violence isn't too egregious, with some exceptions. Like me and my wife like to play Gears of War, and they have the new Gears game coming out. But there's a heavy dose of gore and violence in those games, and so those games aren't something that we play a lot of because of that human on human kind of violence and attacking perspective. This is, again, no judgment to any parent who does something different, and I'm not sitting here saying this is how you need to raise your kids by any means possible. I just want to try to explain at least how I think about it, because there's a lot of games that I would love to play. Like when I look at a game like The Division versus like Gears, The Division offers this bigger grind, this more incentive to playing it over the long term, meaning it, in my mind, it requires more investment in my time to have a good positive experience because they have more content. It's a game that's evolving. Gears has kind of a story and a campaign, and then it kind of falls into the kind of the PvP mindset, and that's or the horde mode, and that ends up something where you feel like I can kind of jump into it, enjoy it, and then I can kind of leave at that time. So it's a game that I'm not necessarily too concerned with like getting and playing, because I know that it's going to be kind of a pick up and play kind of game, not a long-term investment in the game. If Final Fantasy XIV for example, was, had more levels of violence and gore, I'd have a hard time playing that game because of the amount of time that I want to play that game. And that means that I typically would be playing that game with my kids or around my kids. And so hopefully that gives some level of perspective to to where I look at violence in video games and how I kind of manage it within my own household and within what my kids are experiencing and what I choose to play around them. So again, like, yeah, I don't grind endlessly in Destiny downstairs with them, but I'm also gonna play the game and let them kind of pick up the controller and kind of play around with it. It also, for me, I think it gives us a good context to the question about what is real and what isn't real, what makes this a game, what makes this a type of game that, it's a very popular. Shooters are very popular games, and obviously there's going to be a lot of debate, hopefully more studies around what kind of impacts it has. Like, when you go look at the studies with kids and with how much media they can consume, I think that's always a really good kind of measure to make sure that you have a balance in your life and it's not just 100% one thing, one point of view, one way of thinking. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Thanks, guys, for sticking around. If you stuck around this far, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm not saying I'm normal. I think I'm probably kind of weird in that regards because it is a constant evaluation, and it's something that, if video games are going to be a part of my kids' lives, I feel really excited that I have such a passion for them. So I'm very interested in learning what's in the game and what's not in the game. And then kind of making that judgment call. And then, obviously for me, playing the games with the kids. We don't do a lot of, screen time, a lot of handheld time. It's a lot of kind of family time in which that we're all kind of playing a game together. Whether it's a single player game or it's a multiplayer game where we're passing controllers back and forth. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how, if my views evolve as the kids, do, as they get older and all that. So anyway, for Ginger Prime, thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.